Hello, everybody. This is a re-recording, or rather a recording of the session Bruce and I did at Rallion 2014 about Excel, Escape Excel Hell with Rally Portfolio Scenario Planning. So we are recording this session so that folks can view it internally. It will serve as enablement. So with that, we'll get started. I'm Catherine Connor. I'm a solution manager at Rally Software, focused on portfolio management.
I'm Bruce Weingart. I'm a transformation consultant working with the scenario planning team, and I specialize in portfolio management.
So today we're going to talk about Rally Portfolio Scenario Planning, which is a new Rally solution to help you escape from Excel hell. Does it look familiar? Is that the world you live in? Any of those are yours? Lots of colors, spreadsheets. Anybody here using spreadsheet to do resource planning, capacity plans, trying to figure out where you're going to use your resources, how you're going to allocate your teams? That's what we're going to talk about today. And we're going to get you out of that hell. That's our goal. So we're going to do that with this new solution. Rally Portfolio Scenario Planning is a new Rally solution focused on portfolio level capacity planning. It is a solution, which means it includes software, one that already exists, Rally Portfolio Manager, and a new software codenamed Orca. It also includes consulting and training. It is a full solution dedicated to solving real problems. It is purpose-built for today's fast-paced world. So traditional capacity planning practices simply do not serve the new world, the world of quick opportunities coming in on you, threats coming in faster than you want them to. We have to change how we look at capacity planning, how we quickly allocate our resources. So this solution is purpose-built for that new world. It also is an enterprise lean startup project from Rally. What does that mean? What that means is that we actually work with customers to actually co-create that solution, to fully understand, we force ourselves to fully understand the actual problem, stay in the problem domain as long as we needed to have a deep understanding of those problems before we started crafting that solution. This is what this solution is about. Let's go deeper. First, let's look at who is this for. So the solution is for those in your organization that are tasked to make strategy happen. Let me give you an example. How many of you know of your executive going to a nice fancy resort over the summer doing that off-site? Yeah, I see a lot of you. Now when they come back from that off-site, what happens? They say, hey, we came up with 2, 3, 5, hopefully not more than 5, but it may happen, initiatives, and we just know those initiatives are going to keep us in business, they're going to keep us afloat, we're just going to rock with those initiatives. Now Bruce, make it happen. That collection of people here, which may be portfolio manager, product managers, engineering director, they are the collective set of folks that are tasked to make it happen. How many of you have been in this situation? How many of you are looking for this make it happen? This is a hard task. So this is the group of folks this solution is built for. Now what do they think of when that executive offsite happened and they are told to make it happen? Well, they think of how could we make it happen? What are our options? What can we think of to actually deliver on those initiatives? So they need to have a way to run different scenarios. What if we did it this way? What would happen? What if we did it that way? The solution is about allowing them to run those scenarios and run those scenarios away from the execution of agile teams so that they do not disrupt the current productivity that those agile teams have. And the role of that solution is really to come up with what is the best scenario? What is the best way for us to use our resources to deliver the maximum amount of value and as much as we can of those initiatives that those executives have concocted in that fancy offsite. So the outcome of that solution is the right resources, the right features to feed into the Scale Agile Execution Engine. And that is what you know Rally for today, and we are expanding on what Rally can provide with that solution. Another way to look at it is the executive he actually attended the offsite here, Ed. What does he need to have outside of, as outcome of this solution? He needs to know that once that offsite ended and we gave that group of folks the message, make it happen, what comes back? What comes back is a way for Ed to look at what are my resource allocation options today for what I can do later, what I can do in the next quarter, and what type of expertise do I need to consider hiring to actually deliver on that strategic set of plans that we concocted in that offsite. So at the high level, this is what this solution is about. The outcome that you can expect out of that solution is better plans in half the time. So it is a solution for you who are tasked to translate those aspirational roadmaps, usually 3 times the amount of things we can do, into realistic execution plan. It is a solution for you if today you use Excel to run those scenarios or attempt to run those scenarios, figure out how we're going to allocate our resources. And you may probably use PowerPoint to actually communicate those scenarios. And you may spend a lot of time in those PowerPoint slides trying to make them pretty enough for those executives. And it is for you, with my apologies, who may be dreading annual planning. So we are trying to make the pain of annual planning go away and make you more effective and faster at creating those plans. One other thing we did to actually give you better plans in half the time is really look at what type of practices do we need to put in place for this new world of fast-moving business, more opportunities coming to us, more threats coming to us. So part of the solution is a set of principles that are actually helping you get to that outcome, better plans in half the time. We've codified 5 principles that I'll cover here lightly, and then we'll go over more deeply. And those are documented in a set of blogs available on our website under the Agile blog Business Agility theme. Number 1, use the team as resource unit. And this is about, we have proven that using stable teams is actually correlated to higher productivity and higher quality. So if that's true, then we need to start planning with teams in mind. That is different from the FTE traditional resource unit. Number 2, roughly right. We cannot take the time to create fancy, elaborated plans that are so precise that they actually are incorrect. They are wrong because they are so precise for things that may actually change down the road. So allowing ourselves to be roughly right and not spend that amount of time is another principle. Number 3, balancing demand and supply. It is about recognizing what must we do and what can we do, and clearly separating those 2 parts. Number 4, continuous planning cadence. This is about embracing change at the portfolio level. It is about setting ourselves up for inspecting and adapting on a regular basis the portfolio decisions that we are making. And last but not least, tolerate incomplete data. We often don't have all the data we need in this fast-paced world, so we have to be comfortable with planning with not all the data that we may want to have, and just care about the amount of data or the type of data that will make a difference in our exercise of capacity planning. So those are the 5 principles that are built in our solution. We're going to touch on those in more detail as we go along. This is a solution. It is intended to answer real problem. Those are the 3 questions that we have found working with customers are problematic to answer. We're going to cover those as we go through the demonstration of these solutions. We're going to keep in mind those 3 questions. Number 1, how do we realistically deliver, how do we know what we can deliver realistically next year? Realistically being the key word. Number 2, how do we optimize for mid-range planning, quarterly planning, PSI planning if you do SAFe? Number 3, how do we not get burned by those specialization? As much as we want to have cross-functional teams, we know that there are some expertise, some scarce resources that actually are limiting our ability to deliver. we have to care about those or they burn us. So those are the 3 questions we're going to go through and present the solutions with. So we'll start with the first one. What can we realistically deliver next year? What this is about in this fast-paced world is accepting the reality of capacity limitations. So even if I was giving you $1 million today and I would give you the right to go hire resources, and you could hire those resources, you could somehow find those resources, they couldn't be as productive as you would like them to be. This is a limitation we have to accept as opposed to fight. The other part is we need to limit how much we are detailing to how much we actually need to detail. So what we're trying to avoid is not detailing too much in advance for things that we may not actually never get to. So those are 2 key aspects that we're going to walk through and keep in mind as we demonstrate how the solution answers that question. The 2 principles that we're going to care a lot to answer that questions are 1, team as a resource unit. So again, team as a resource unit is about not focusing on the FTE level, individual level, because they are proven facts, and Rally developed the Software Development Performance Index that actually has proof that using stable teams has a direct influence on productivity and quality. So if that's true, then we do need to use teams as opposed to individuals, which by now we know an individual in this complex software world really cannot deliver business value. A team can deliver value. So if that's true, we're going to use the team as the core unit of resource, which will simplify our capacity planning by a factor of 10. If you think of an agile team that is 7 to 9, 10 people, you only care about that grouping as opposed to individual 7 to 9 or 10 people. So using a team as a resource unit is actually going to simplify the exercise of doing capacity planning, make it faster for you. And then the second principle, I'm going to let Bruce talk about that one.
So the second principle here is roughly right versus precisely wrong. Traditional portfolio management, either a spreadsheet or some tools, you may be used to this. How many people are frustrated with having to fill out individual FTE assignments, create a complete work breakdown structure for work that's going to be done a year from now when you don't know all of the details? And how often do you feel like you're just making stuff up so you can fill it out and get some number in return for the plan? Okay, a few of you raised your hands on that. And that's what we mean by precisely wrong. So you go through this exercise in a lot of detail to work out, here's a critical path to do this project and all of the tasks. And so we can make individual resource assignments. And a year out, you're just making most of it up just to fill in the blanks and come up with some number. So that's what we mean by precisely wrong. And a better alternative is to get roughly right. In fact, probably get closer to what the actual outcome could be with a lot less work. And then not be misled by the precision of that plan that is really not going to be the best plan to follow anyway, because you're going to learn as you go along. And besides that, who has time in today's world to do all of that and keep up?
Well, I think it's time to take a look. What we're going to do actually is for each of those questions, show you live how the solution answers the question. So first we're going to set some stage, I think, of the type of environment.
Before we jump into the demo, I'd like to talk about our demo company. It's called Mega Sales. This is a fictional company. However, the challenges that Mega Sales faces and the strategies they're following are very similar to many of the customers that we've talked to in understanding these problems and developing this solution. So Mega Sales is a large retail company that has traditionally great customer loyalty in their local bricks and mortar stores. So they've been very successful in department store sales in large urban areas and smaller metropolitan areas, great customer loyalty. A few years ago, we launched a online store, the Mega Sales Online. That's also been getting a great response and starting to do a really significant amount of business through our online store. And the strategy our executives came back was, let's put those together so we can compete with either the other retail stores that don't have as great an online presence, as well as compete with the great online presence like an Amazon. So what are the things where we can leverage the loyalty in our local stores that the customers know of? And we have a number of initiatives that have come back to help us do that. So we've been starting Agile mainly with our online group. Really, it has showed some great progress and success scaling Agile. We're moving some of our other things like our point of sales and retail operations applications. We're bringing them more into Agile development world now as well. And so that's part of the strategy that we'll talk about.
So as Brice is going to get set up with the demo, a little bit of the solution software called Orca Codename, telling you again what this software is about. If you recall one of the earlier slides, it is separated from the execution environment so that those strategic planners, those that get the message, make it happen after the strategic offsite, actually have a place where they can run those scenarios, create those scenarios without disrupting the Agile execution happening in the core Rally product that you are familiar with. So it is a different environment, purposely so, and this is a description that you can actually have a clearer understanding of what I just said here. But it is a product that we have developed with customers, and again, that is embedding those principles. So as Bruce is going to walk us through, we'll point out some of those principles and refer to those.
Okay, well first, one of the things in getting a reference, we talk about demand and supply. And we talked about this solution as working, part of the solution is Rally Portfolio Manager, which is where you would continue to author your portfolio items. And so we brought in our portfolio planning, our portfolio for planning. You're not going to bring everything in, obviously, right? You're not going to bring stuff that you're currently executing. You're only going to bring those things in that you're interested in planning for the next quarter, the next year, whatever your planning horizon might be. So what we see here is our current planning portfolio. I can scroll on down here. You can see we have a long list of things that's stack ranked as far as at least coming in what we think the priority order of these items are. And in fact, you can change the stack ranking here and not affect the stack ranking in RPM. Right? So from our planning perspective, this is kind of our global demand, and we can put the overall priorities together. You'll also notice that some of these columns show some of the information that you might be familiar with from RPM, like what project, what investment category, what state that item was in. And then also, we'll be talking a little bit more about how the estimates are used for capacity planning, so I'm going to come back to that. In order to bring things in, I can click over here and import from RPM. And one of the things that we've found with large organizations is they may have a couple of different workspaces, and we have that at Mega Sales. We had our web store start in a separate workspace from our retail operations. And so we can actually bring items from both workspaces and put them together for planning here. So I could select web store. And the other thing you may have noticed is we have two levels, the initiative level and the market feature level. And you may be asking, well, what about the other 6 levels or 4 levels that we created in RPM? And RPM, Rally Portfolio Manager, has a lot of flexibility about what levels you can put in there. But because we have some logic around what the planning means here, and in fact want to be able to normalize that across workspace, we have a very specific definition. So an initiative is a unit of demand. It's useful for longer range planning because it represents the investment decision that you're going to make, right? Are we going to fund this initiative or that initiative? And if we trade off one initiative for another, what impact is it going to have on our annual plan? Marketable feature we view as a unit of business value delivery. So if we deliver this marketable feature, will that move the needle, right? It's kind of the smallest unit that our customers and stakeholders are really going to care about from a value delivery standpoint. So you're able to map that from either workspace or whatever multiple workspace. In this case, we're going to bring initiative and features, and you can filter it by some query. So we're not actually going to bring any demand in for this demo because I've got that already set up. But I did want to point out how you can support these larger cross-company portfolios as we have here at Megasales. So let's go over and look at a roughly right planning scenario. So I'm going to go over to the scenario planning tab and start with preliminary scoping. And one of the things you'll notice is we have different named tabs across the top, and each one of those represents a separate scenario. I have this default for fiscal 2015, and what I want to start doing is actually duplicate that. And then I'm going to come down here and rename this one. And one of the reasons I want to keep that default is we're going to create this scenario as what can we do with our current staff. So we're just going to stay with our current staff and see how much demand they can realistically complete. Now Catherine may come along later and do another scenario that says, well, what if we got enough money to hire 5 new teams over the next year? What that might look like. How can we get roughly right around that? So what you'll see then is over here on the left where it says select demand, we have some items listed in the order that were in that demand page that we can bring into this scenario. And you can see I brought a few of those in here, and as I get farther down the list, there's some that haven't been brought in. And as I add those things, they're going to start consuming capacity. So what do we mean by that? So on the upper left here, you can see where you have total rough capacity in person days equals 17,520 person days. Now some of you might be wondering, whoa, this is Agile, shouldn't you be using story points for that? Now we've agreed that story points are a great unit for individual teams to use because you can calibrate it to their velocity. But to work at the enterprise level, at some point you need to normalize it. And you can choose what units you want to use here. Some companies have chosen to use enterprise story points. But we found pretty common is still this idea of person days, because they can carry that across their different units easily. And that's what we found at Megasales. That person days was a very convenient and useful unit and remember, we're doing rough estimating at this point. And we'll talk about how that later gets pulled by teams for them to do their more refined estimates using whatever points or things that individual teams might use. And then over here on the right, we see so far we're using 9,380 of our 17,520 story points. So let's go ahead and add some additional demand. I'm going to come down here and add the Sales Associate Wizard initiative. And you can see we have some initiatives and we have a few features that carried over for some other things we were doing before. And in fact, this modernized customer service portal, I'm going to go ahead and add a bunch of features because we had done that detail. We actually thought we were going to get to that last quarter and it carried over. And since we have the feature level detail, let's use it. But this next generation platform, we have a few features, but we're not really confident that we've got that elaborated. So we're just going to put that in as an initiative. And I'm just going to go down here and add a whole series of additional initiatives. And you can see then we have a lot of things down here. And I have this cut line now that I can drag down here. Just put it right under next generation platform. If I scroll back to the top, I can see that my little thermometer showing my capacity consumption has updated. It's now green. At 70%, it'll turn green to say that you're starting to really get some reasonable level of utilization, but we're not overloading it yet. So we might go ahead and drag that cut down a little farther. What happens if we go all the way down under Explore Alternate Retail Channels? Well, then we go red. We have like over almost 24,000 person days against a capacity of 17,500. So the execs would like this if we said we could get this much done, but they wouldn't like it when we didn't get it done.
Make it happen.
Make it happen. So what's the best combination that we can get? We have this handy dandy fast forward button which will position the cut line to match our capacity. So when I can hit that, you can see that now we're using about 16,600 out of the 17,000, so we have a little bit of slack, and you can see where the cut line is positioned. So now we've got a roughly right, following the priorities that we already brought into this, to make sure that we're not planning 3 times as much as we could possibly do. And you can choose sort of, maybe we want to push that a little bit. That's a little bit over, but maybe we want to kind of plan and see what that looks like. But I would say let's keep it here for now, and we'll come back to that. Did you want to make a comment on roughly right?
How many of you actually would think that this really would help you make hard prioritization decisions? You can actually share that with your executives and say, well, this is what we can really do. There's other options. We can create different scenarios, but this is red and green. Can do, cannot do, given the capacity we have. So this is a tool to help have that conversation of we can't do everything you want, but you have options. You can do this one or you can do that one. How many people are trying to do that in Excel today? Yeah, a lot of people. And how easy is it to do that in Excel? Not very easy. Yep.
So let's dig in a little bit and look at the capacity side of this, right? So we were looking at the demand side, and let's look at our capacity side of that. So I'm going to go to the time frame capacity for this scenario. And this is where if Catherine now wanted to try what happens if we hire 5 additional teams, right? If the execs say we really want to get all that stuff done and we're going to give you more money to get it done, maybe she would copy this scenario and go off and make some changes. So first of all, the scenario is for a set time frame, because you have a certain set of people working on things in a given time frame, and they have a certain capacity to get work done during that time frame. So our annual fiscal year at Mega Sales is a calendar year. So we're going from January 1st, 2015 to December 31st, 2015. And we see that at the top. And so you could plan for the next year or whatever horizon that you would want. And then we see the capacities. For instance, we see Mega Sales has got 3,360 person days, which is added up of the 4 Scrum teams we have under there. So we have Polaris, Sirius, Rigel, and Arcturus, and that gets added up. So that shows using the team as our fundamental unit of capacity. And we have those up and running, as I mentioned, have a pretty good track record scaling Agile with our online store. We have a product catalog group. I didn't put the teams under that one because we're figuring about how to reorganize those teams. So we just put a number in for the whole delivery group. A delivery group is basically a team of teams. In a Scale Agile framework, that might be known as an Agile release train. So if you're familiar with that, that would work for you. And then again, down here, the retail or the payment processing delivery group, we had a couple of teams in it. So that's where our capacity of 17,520 person days came from. And we were able to get our roughly right. So let's go back and talk about what to look at next.
Yeah, let's actually summarize what we just saw. So how do we answer that question? What can we realistically deliver next year? How is this solution helping you? It's helping you in 2 ways. One is saving time with that preliminary scoping by not having to detail everything up front because if you feel you have to. So allowing you to actually just detail the level of detail that you need to just feel good about the answer to that question. And then it simplifies the exercise by not having you to consider FTEs, individual folks, slicing and dicing, how many hours will I have Liz working on or Kendrick working on. So simplify by basically using the team, which is a group of 7, 9, 10 people or more, and that just cuts the amount of time you have to answer that question. So better answer, half the time. So then we're going to go to the next question. The next question is that the solution is going to answer is how can we optimize mid-range planning? So the example here I like to give is as we see customers learn about doing PSI planning or quarterly planning, mid-range planning, and get through the cadence of this is how that planning event takes place, this is how we organize it, that's the input of it, what happens during that day, we see a pattern of challenges that customers face, and that is we know the mechanics of doing agile release train, PSI planning on a regular basis, and what we realize is, well, the business outcome that we get out of it is not always as good as it could be. And we come in those meetings with sometimes 3 times the amount of features that actually can be delivered during that time frame. So we're wasting a lot of time building a backlog of features, walking into that event where really a third of it should have been detailed. So there's a lot of cost efficiency that are not happening. Additionally, the second challenge we see is you invite all those folks into these events, which you try to have everybody co-located for that planning, and in the middle of planning you realize, we should have actually called that other team or that other set of specialists that we will need to have to deliver on the scope for that next quarter. But we forgot, we didn't realize, we didn't think they would be needed. Those are extremely expensive myths. And so the person really, the executive paying for that event, is not getting the return on investment that they're hoping. We're flying all those people in, we think we're gonna get great business outcome, and the business outcomes are not there. It's really not making as much of a dent on the strategy that we're trying to deliver quarter by quarter. So this is the challenge that we're trying to solve by optimizing with the solution mid-range planning. And this is really about going from those long-range plans, those strategic plans that decided this is where we need to go, this is the direction we need to walk towards to stay alive as a company, beat the competition. How do we know in the next quarter, what should we work on in the next quarter? If you only look at one quarter at a time, you may actually miss the fact that one of those long-range plans was something that you got to start working on this quarter to have a chance to deliver 6 to 9 or 9 months from now. So it is really the reconciliation of those longer-range plans with what do you start doing quarter after quarter. The 2 principles that come to bear to solve that answers are continuous planning cadence. So the idea that you can plan at different levels, different horizons, and just keep on inspecting and adapting on regular cadence of reviewing where are you at, should you be changing direction, should you be pivoting, but have a regular heartbeat. And just like you have at the team level where you have sprints, it's kind of the same idea at the portfolio level. The cadence are not exactly the same amount, obviously, but the idea of regular check-in, regular inspect and adapt is what's key here. And the second principle I'm going to let Bruce talk about it is the balancing demand and supply.
We saw a little bit of that in the first part of the demo, right, where we were looking at the amount of demand that we pulled in and seeing how much of that we could fit realistic with the capacity. This next section, we're going to look at how you actually match that up with the specific delivery groups, because there might be different areas that we look at, and this is a useful model to describe that. So what we found at Mega Sales, we have different business units. We've got our online Mega Sales site, and we have our different retail stores. We've got these giant mega stores in major metro markets, and we have smaller metro market Mega Sales stores. And so we have different value streams for what the shopping, buying, service experience is like for an online customer or for the Mega Sales store customer. And we have different application areas that support that. So one example is we have the online store shopping site. But shared between the two is our inventory management. And in fact, that's really important because one of the strategies we have is we want somebody to be able to shop for something online and see if it's in stock at the local store and maybe go pick it up in a half hour versus have it shipped to them. And that's a competitive advantage that we have compared to a strictly online type environment. So as you'll see in our delivery groups, their delivery groups represent the code base, the technology stack, and the people that know how to work in a particular area. And we'll see some of those examples in the demo. I'll talk a little bit more about that.
So, should we take a look?
Yes.
Let's take a look.
So back to preliminary scoping. And I'm going to select another scenario, this Q3 scenario, that we already have roughly right demand fitting our capacity. So we're using 2,330 person days so far out of 2,360. So we're kind of getting right up there close to the capacity. And we have a number of the different delivery groups involved in that. But let's go figure out how that actually is going to work. We're going to have the right people working on the right stuff to match our demand to supply. So I'm going into the allocations page in order to do that. So on the right, we can see different delivery groups that are our supply. So I'm going to click on Mega Sales. And we can see what Mega Sales has these 4 teams we talked about before. And Mega Sales is the delivery group or release train that's focused on our online store. We also have payment processing, that handles all our credit card and other type payment processing. We have the inventory group I just talked about. And we also have a product catalog group. Keeps track of what are the products that are available to buy in our stores or online. And we recently started a whole mobile initiative, and we have a separate VP of mobile and social. On the right over here, we see those different items that we showed in the preliminary scoping. Shopping cart feature, knowledge base feature. And each one of these markers shows that there's one delivery group working on shopping cart, 2 delivery groups working on knowledge base. And I can add to now Mega Sales by, let's pull this feature over and add it to Mega Sales. So they just got another feature, and we're going to add one more feature to Mega Sales. Oh no, Mega Sales is over capacity. And now shows that we're actually minus 50 capacity for the Mega Sales delivery group. Payment processing still got 260 person days of capacity. Inventory still got 120 person days of capacity. And in fact, if we look down at the features that Mega Sales is already working on, there's one, credit card payments. They're really, we'd like to have payment processing do most of the work because we don't want to be target. We want to make sure that that's secure, processed properly. That's an important set of skills around that particular area. So let's go ahead and select credit card payments and add payment processing to that. And we're going to actually assign most of that work to payment processing. So Mega Sales gets 25, and payment processing gets another 125. And so that we get the total of 150. And the other thing we can do is I can make payment processing the owner for that. So if there's any questions about it, Mega Sales is involved, the online site, to make sure that gets integrated to the online site. But payment processing is really the one that's on top of that, if we have any questions about that. So you can see now that Mega Sales is back in capacity, not over capacity. Payment processing, we consume a little bit more of theirs. And so let's go back over here to the left and see what else needs to be allocated. We have this service level agreements feature. Let's click on that because nobody's been allocated to that yet. And the service level agreements is really about those non-functional requirements that these different applications really need to satisfy to provide a great experience to everybody. And in this case, that applies to everybody but mobile. So Mega Sales has got a part to do on that. Payment processing has a part to do on that. Inventory has their part, and product catalog has their part. And in fact, it's roughly equal parts. So Mega Sales gets 75. Payment processing gets 75. And notice there's a little warning down here that as I'm entering this, it doesn't quite add up yet to the whole 300 person day estimate that we had for the overall feature. So it's kind of letting me know I'm not quite done with the job here until I get that filled out. And now we've got it allocated across all of those. And as you can see, we've consumed almost all the capacity for most of those. Payment processing's got a little extra, and inventory has a little extra capacity. But rather than piling on, in fact, payment processing tends to have more stuff come up, and we're happy actually to have a little bit extra capacity there, a little bit of slack. And we can go over here and look at the mega sales group, for instance. The number of dots represents the number of items in each one of their backlog. And now we know what the backlog is for mega sales to pull into their next mid-range planning cycle. So we're not saying this is your plan and go do it, because we really want the right people to have a realistic amount of stuff together and have a planning event, figure out how that's all going to work out. But this gets us to the point where we can optimize and get the best results out of that planning.
Yeah, I really like just a couple of comments. So you notice the demand on the side and the supply on the other side. This is the clear delineation between what you should do, your business priorities, with what you can do, the reality of what you can actually do. So by clearly separating the two, we are preventing organization from trying to capacitize in a way the demand, trying to see what fits and mingle those two together, which we see a lot of organizations doing sometimes not actually knowingly that they were doing it. So part of the principle being embedded in the product is to clearly remind you that those were the business priorities we all agreed to do. Let's not reshuffle things to make things fit. This is the reality of what was agreed upon, and this is the reality of what we can deliver. And now you can clearly determine, in order to deliver that demand, those are actually the expert groups that need to be involved. So you know who to invite to that planning event and have a confidence that you're not missing on expertise that will be required to actually commit to that plan for that mid-range, that quarterly planning event.
Ready to go back to the summary?
Yes, if you would please. So again, to summarize that second question, is to get those right resources and that right set of features, which may sound simple, but we see organization over and over, once they grok the mechanics of doing a quarterly event and they know how to do it, it's how do you maximize the business outcomes and how do you make sure that you are getting exactly the largest amount of value and not delaying anything by omitting to invite the right people and forcing yourself to replan the week later because you couldn't actually get to commitment during that event. So the third question is, how do you not get burned by specialization? So we talked about the team as the resource unit. When we say team, we really mean a group of people with a common goal. And ideally, you would always have agile teams with cross-functional ability, and we haven't yet, frankly, run into one company that can claim to have fungible resources where any work, any features could be worked on by any teams. So there is this concept of specialization. How many people here actually can claim not to have to deal with specialization? Yeah, that's what we've seen as well. We see most customers having some degree of specialization, and by specialization, we really mean a constraint in your capacity pool that you need to care about if you don't want to have a long pole situations where you think you can do all those features, but UX, which tends to be a common example, we don't have enough of UX folks. We cannot, as much as we'd like to, and we understand is the right thing to do, we would like to have a UX person in each and every one of our cross-functional team. We just don't have enough of those specialists. Therefore, we tend to have a pool of UX folks, and the teams borrow their expertise and borrow their capacity. But they are scarce and they are critical to delivery. So how do you actually deal with those specialization and not get burned by those? And the key here is to account for them. But at the same time, to use the last principle of tolerate incomplete data. And I'm going to let Bruce talk about the various aspects.
So the first one is specialization is the exception and not the rule. So we are using cross-functional teams, are fundamentally using a capacity. And we know in one of these areas I mentioned at Mega Sales, whether it's our online store or the inventory management, that those teams have the fundamental, they've got the Java programmer and the web developer and the testing resources to deliver value. And we don't need to trap those skill sets at an individual level. However, we know there are some particular constraints or bottlenecks that we run into. UX happens to be one of them. Another one in mega sales is we have kind of a specialized data set around our product catalog and our inventory management. So understanding that data is a valuable one. And the third one we use at mega sales is platform. And in fact, platform is interesting because we had platform as a whole separate group. It would be a delivery group in this, and then we might have seen that in the allocations we were just doing. Only what we saw was that every single feature had to go to the platform group. And that was a dependency that was really causing us lots of challenges. So what we did is took those people and spread them into the other groups, and as you'll see, then we treat platform as an expertise that these different delivery groups have a certain amount of. The other example of incomplete data we've also already seen, and that's delay feature creation until just in time. Kind of traditional approach I mentioned about is we're going to do a full work breakdown structure, break everything down into tasks, and come up with a critical path so that we can come up with some estimates on this. Well, what we see is, and lots of people tell us is, well, that initiative we're going to start second half of next year, I'm just making a bunch of stuff up so that I can fill in that list. So why should we do that? What we should do is treat that initiative at a roughly right level and defer detailing the best features till closer to the time we're actually working on it. And it turns out at Megasales we found that actually works really well for us because the closer we identify what the feature is, we tend to satisfy our customers a lot better, right? Because it hasn't been sitting on the shelf for 6 to 12 months. Things are moving too fast. What we found is we were throwing lots of stuff out that looked like a great idea a year ago, and a better idea came along, or it just became obsolete in the meantime. So we see both of those at work here.
So let's take a look. And as Bruce switches over, one common is you may hear actually customers say, well, we have skill sets to deal with. We like the word expertise as a representation of you may have skill sets in terms of how you get hired. You have great Java expertise or CSS expertise or what have you. Those are really kind of human resource, HR, hiring skill sets. It does not make you productive right off. So expertise is this concept of you can actually deliver value on the code base of your organization. So there's a difference between skill sets and expertise, and we chose expertise for that reason. But you may find customers use the word skill sets, really meaning expertise.
So we're going to go back, return to the scenario of the annual scenario of 2015 with our current staff. And let's go back to, first of all, looking at preliminary scoping. And we're going to then focus on, since we already have the demand in here, I can put away the demand tray and just focus on the items that we've selected. And we also have this toggle to actually view how our expertise is being used. And if you notice, we were nice and green, and now we're all red in terms of that use. Before we go into that from this side, though, let's kind of look at how we set up for expertise. So one of the things we hadn't looked at so far is the supply page. So in supply, we have the different delivery groups: mega sales, our retail, catalog, inventory, mobile, payment processing, and they have a different certain set of expertise. So mega sales has got UX, data, and platform expertise, as you can see here. The retail has got data and platform, and as I'd expect, catalog and inventory both have data and platform as well. And these are easily defined by you. If I scroll down here to the bottom, you can see the three types of expertise that we found are the constraints we need to worry about. But let's say credit card fraud has been getting to be a bigger issue. So we want to add fraud as an expertise. And we could put that into payment processing. If I click on here, I could add fraud. And then maybe I want to add that to mega sales as well, because there's certain shopping patterns that our fraud algorithms help us see. I'm going to go ahead and remove that from the demo. So it's just an example for us.
It sounded like you were burned by fraud before, Bruce.
And let's go over to back to the preliminary scoping and see what we can do about this fact that we were fine, roughly right, amount of capacity, but we're over on all of our expertise constraints. And if I scroll down to the bottom of the page, you see where the cut line is here. And this is where you need your pointer. There is a Tetris effect where there's a gray pattern which may not show real clearly on their projection. Maybe I'll come out on the screenshots. This shows that we run out of platform expertise, 3 items from the bottom. We run out of data expertise, 2 from the bottom. We run out of the shopping experience. We run out of UX expertise. So we could just drag the line up, but we might still have some more capacity. So let's look at some of these things. It looks like next generation platform takes both a lot of UX and a lot of platform, and it's been somewhat controversial, as I don't know how it might be in your organization. So let's just, for experimentations, because it's a scenario to play around with, what happens when I drag that down? Well, I now have plenty of UX, but I run out of, I still run out of data pretty quickly. So I can move this one up, and now data just runs out sooner. And let's try explore alternate resale channels. Maybe if I move that up above here. No, I just wanted to get a little higher. There we go.
So what you're saying here is you can actually decide to deliver things that are not relying on that expertise. You can move things up above the line to say, well, we could deliver those things because the expertise is not limiting us there.
Right.
But you have that visual.
Yeah, and so let's go ahead and look at it. So now UX is well within our capacity. Data is a little bit over, and platform is getting there. We're also currently, our total capacity is under. So this might be a case where we want to go ahead and live with this, and since it's the annual plan, maybe we add some additional training, bring somebody up to speed to have a little bit more capacity as far as data goes. Or we could continue to make some trade-off decisions in terms of what the load is on those things.
So can you talk about how come you didn't fill up all the cells there? It seems like you just filled out some of them. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, and for instance, we'll maintain legacy inventory system in these different points. It's not to say they don't have any data or platform capacity, but we do sort of assume that any given story might have, there's a certain amount that we just do, because that's what it takes to do things. And even like our No Worry Local Returns has 150, but super priority shipping, we might need a little bit of UX, but it wasn't worth fussing about. So these are the ones that are worth putting in there because they represent where we're really going to add up to something significant and create a bottleneck for us. So we kind of have a threshold about whether we think it's a significant amount to put in there or not. And that saves us a lot of fussing and gets us roughly right and seems to work pretty well.
And then the other part is, again, you have a mix of features and initiatives, so you are not forcing yourself to detail every initiative.
Right, and especially with the annual plan, as I mentioned, the things that we were closer to working on last quarter got pushed into our annual plan. We knew the details about that. But some of these things, we're not even sure we're going to do the initiative yet. And so we don't want to waste all the time of detailing out all the features.
That makes sense.
Okay.
So let's summarize that third question. The idea with that third question is don't fuss unless you have to. So we're going to help you not get burned, but we're not going to force you to actually detail everything in order to not get burned. So we're going to save you time to just where your time is meaningful. So this is how we're going to help you not just assume that you have agile teams and life is dandy and specialization doesn't exist in an agile world. It absolutely exists. You need to care about it, but you should not care more than you have to. And that's very different from the traditional way of looking at roles and skill sets to make sure that you have the right type of formation in that team. You don't need to have to go to that level of detail. So again, the three questions that we have tasked these solutions to answer are, what can we deliver realistically next year, regardless of what the offsites comes out as, with 5 times the amount of things we can do, what can we realistically do next year that is meaningful to the business? 2, how can we optimize the first steps to that annual plan, and quarter after quarter, making sure that it is the best every quarter we can focus on, and we have the right resources called in for that expensive event, mid-range planning event. And then that third one we just covered is making sure that you care about those specialization and you don't end up with a long pole situation that gets you in the end. You thought you could deliver all those features, but you forgot that UX were constraints and you did not take that into account. So again, the goal is helping you create better plan faster, half the time as what you've done in the past. So again, the recap of that solution and the goal of that solution is to model roughly right long-range plans to inform mid-range plans. So to inform what you're going to do next quarter, rather than going quarter at a time and not see beyond one quarter, is to actually have a direction of we are working in that direction, and this is the first step we need to take in that direction. If you don't know where you're walking, you may have a tendency to every quarter pivot left and right, and really at the end of the year not meet those strategic goals that were set forth at the executive offsite. So it is feeding into the agile execution engine the right people, the right resources, and then the right features. Doing that across the entire portfolio so that you can optimize across the whole, and doing that without disrupting the actual execution, the productivity of the teams that are working on what you decided last quarter. You cannot afford to involve them in creating the roughly right plans if you expect them to deliver at the same time. So, anybody interested in this solution? Does it sound like something that may be helpful to get you out of Excel hell? All right, so let's talk about the availability of that solution. I mentioned earlier we created it in an enterprise lean startup environment, which means we have been working with customers. We are currently in limited beta, which means we are working with a small set of very actively involved customers that are dedicating a lot of their time with us to share their pain, share what they hope as a solution to Excel help. We are going to be moving into an open beta towards the end of the summer, which means that solution will be available to all Rally customers. And then our goal is to reach general availability based on the beta feedback that we receive. So if you'd like to join us, we'd love to talk to you. Realize that during the summer we're asking for a lot of your time to co-create with us. But rest assured, we will have a solution for all of you in an open beta mode after the summer. You can get started today though. So we talked about the solution earlier as we spent a lot of time on the product and demoing the product. But the product is of no use, as some people would say, a fool with a tool is still a fool. If you don't adopt those principles, if you don't change, if you need to change from a more traditional plan-based approach to portfolio planning, if you're not in the situation where you are changing those practices and adopting those principles, that product, that solution is not going to be of value. So we can get you started now to be ready for this open beta with our coaching and consulting and training part of the solutions, which really will help you get started faster, get those 3 folks that we saw earlier, be ready to adopt the solution, understand what those modern capacity planning principles are, and most importantly, understand how you actually adopt them. What are the steps to moving in those directions? And as we talked about, the demand side of the solution actually resides in Rally Portfolio Manager. So whether you are not using Rally Portfolio Manager today, or you are using it and you may have a lot of things in it, helping you setting it up to leverage this solution is what you can get started with over the summer. Anything you would like to add to that, Bruce?
Well, there is a consulting and training data sheet that's available. I definitely recommend you take a look at that. It outlines the services that goes along with this solution.
Great. So that's all for this session. Thank you very much.
Thank you.